Okay, so my name is MC, and I've made this channel to practice my builds and showcase my progression over the summer. But before we do that, we're gonna need to get through the basics of building first. Those being, how do we actually build something? How do we take any sort of structure or just like blocks in general and make them look good? Now, I would say there are around 5 steps of making a build that we will go through in this video. The first one being the research phase. Now, the second phase we're going to be going into is the designing phase. After that, we'll get into the building phase, where we will actually build our structure. And then lastly, we'll be doing the detailing phase where everything comes together. Okay, so now we're on the basic first step of how we design things. So my first step that I decided to do was, first of all, just kind of go on the Minecraft wiki or like any sort of site that lists different architectural styles and just look at ones they have. The ones on the Minecraft wiki that they have are medieval, colonial, Victorian, realism, modern, and futuristic. So I separate those into little tab groups here, which we have right here. We got medieval right here, we have colonial right here, we have Victorian here, we have brutalism here, we got modern right here, and if you can see with the light, we have futuristic right here. Now basically what I did for all of these, we'll just go into the like medieval because so the thing I've done here is basically just look at one like structure or house and then take a Minecraft build or something like it. So I've taken this little house that kind of has a few key components that it does here, like the little base right here that has a darker tone of block, and then a white onto like the higher levels with some nice accents. Just like over here we have a darker base with some like whites that is just like a regular block with some spruce accents, which I think is really nice. And then what I've done is I found this website called Block Palettes. It's very cool, and basically what it just allows you to pick like any palette from any block. If I go like, hold up, let me just make a new tab real quick. If I go into like just the home page and I click like, ooh, this is, I like blues, this is cool, let's go to this. Ooh, it sees all the things here. It says all the blocks in use right here. Isn't that cool? And it says different popular blocks. So if I'm like, oh, I want one with mossy blocks in it, and I tap that, boom, it gives me things with mossy blocks. This is so cool. This is really cool. Also, when I was looking at different videos that helped me, this one's by Mr. Lemon Slice, thank you for that. I found 2 channels right here, which I think are really, really cool. We got WBC Builds. He has more things on like Victorian era and stuff like that, and like he actually made a really interesting video right here based on like specifying different like types of builds in the Victorian era. So he has like the, I think that's Georgian. He has the, I'm not gonna try and pronounce that one. We got the Victorian and then the Edwardian, I don't know how to say it, era. But yeah, they all like are kind of used under the term of Victorian. So he did a really cool video just kind of explaining stuff like that. And then also Leon SBU is also very cool. He did a whole video on, here it is. He did a whole video on like explaining cyberpunk builds, which is like a subsection of futuristic builds, because they have more like, you know, like the more pleasant and like peaceful type of futuristic build, but there's also like the more dystopian cyberpunk thing, which is a lot more like deeper and darker with like very like vibrant like city sort of colors, and then like huge like bland and bleak skyscrapers everywhere. Okay, now on to the designing. For this phase, we actually need to pick a certain style to build with. I'm probably going to go with this house from the colonial style for this video, but this is something I always think should be subject to change depending on what biome you spawn in. So when I'm building, I tend to wait on actually making my world first, but we just want to know how to actually make something look nice. My first step is to pick out which colors of wool I'm going to use before I actually start building my house. I chose yellow wool for the body, red wool for the extra bits, blue wool for the roofs, and lime green wool for the floor plan, but you'll see more of that one later. The reason we're going to use walls to make a rough outline of what this building is going to look like is so that we have an idea of what it's going to turn out like before we actually start placing blocks, and so we can make sure our middles actually stay in the middle of the build. One thing about me is that my outlines are a lot more detailed than they should be, because this is just to make sure that you know what your building is actually going to turn out nice. Having around like 5 colors for a specific build is completely unnecessary and probably bad for making something like a larger town, where you could get very easily confused about what color of wool each color means. To avoid this problem, I recommend just using 1 or 2 colors if you're not building something like a mega base or something super intricate. Now, I am pausing a lot here because I'm trying to make sure that I stay with what my reference house is actually looking like. Luckily, I found a house that has a bunch of different pictures of it on Shutterstock, but normally you'll just have one image of a building from a specific angle, so I recommend either finding a different house in the same or similar style, or you can just try going on Google Maps and finding the house. But if you don't know exactly where the house is, I would recommend just having a bunch of different reference images. Okay, now that we have our house built, we can look at our color palette we made earlier to take out what works and get rid of what doesn't. I have chosen to add a few blocks like mud bricks, granite blocks, or cyan wool. A rule of thumb I like to use when picking up blocks is to go with your gut. If you feel like something won't work with the design you planned, then don't add it. Or if you think of a color that would work really well halfway through your build, by all means test it. A lot of the process is just testing things and making sure to follow through with your ideas, and not giving up on those ideas halfway, but I will talk about that more in the next section. Building. For the building portion of this video, I started changing the original wool in our layout to their respective blocks. So I started taking out all of the yellow wool that acted as a foundation to start adding things like quartz pillars. Now that I had a good idea of the shape of this building, I started working on the walls. I really tried to stay with the idea of having lighter blues on the bottom, shown with copper and prismarine, and darker blues on the top, shown with the warp wood, cyan wool, and a I don't know how to say that one. But I think that idea really worked well. Another thing I want to note here is that as I was building, I kind of stopped looking at my reference. I think that's because after a while, I just got the idea of how to create this house. So for a lot of these things, I kind of semi-winged them, like the porch in the front, because its roof is like fully flat, but like it being fully flat is very ugly. So I decided to make it like, you know, kind of like curve up. And so in that case, I decided it'd be a smart idea if I just cut out the window there, which I think turned out way better. One thing I do want to note is that for me, after a few hours of non-stop building, I tend to look at everything I'm creating as ugly and bad, which looking back isn't fully right. Only like half of my builds are garbage, but that's because most of the time, I tend to never really follow through with the houses I'm building. So one thing I've learned from this build is just to take a break sometimes and sleep on what you've made. So I went to bed, and as I woke up the next morning, I had tons of new ideas and was excited to work on this. Even after I started to work on my newer ideas, I realized that the only reason I thought that half of what I did looked ugly was because I just hadn't had time to step back and think about what I had made. And overall, I think it looks great. Now on to the detailing phase. I kind of used the building phase and fused it with the actual detailing phase, but the things I did here were mostly things like adding black wool behind glass so it looks like there's something there, adding a pool with that one really messed up thing pools do where they add a kiddie pool like directly beside the deepest part of the pool for no reason other than pure chaos, and a fancy little bonfire which I just decided to add because there was nothing on the side of the area, and a fancy bonfire which I added because there was nothing on the side of the area, so I thought having a garden would be fun, and it was a good decision. So, now that we figure out how to actually build something, we can actually make videos. I haven't really figured out what my upload schedule is going to be like yet, but I'm going to try and make at least one video per month, so it's going to be more than most SMP content creators. But, wait, is that sign? No sign, no, please, no sign, no, no, please, no, please, I love it, please don't kill me,